So in this next video we're going to just quickly look at the mesh primitives. So if we'd have been in Maya, these would have probably been called the polygon primitives. So keeping to traditional, A, X, delete. We're going to just start with a new collection. I'm just going to call these primitives just to keep everything, and then with that selection selected, everything new should drop under that. So we can start adding objects, adding meshes by going to the add menu and go to mesh, or we can add by Shift A and you get your context menu straight in there. So let's start with the good old-fashioned cube. And in Maya, we'd be over in the channel box and we'd be opening up the hierarchy and the history, and we'd be adding more things. And in Blender, we've got the same sort of thing down here, similar thing. So we've got some basic sizings that we can do, so we can immediately change the size. We're working in meters. So let's do that again. So we're working in meters, and it remembers the last one. So let's make this a 1 by 1. I caught the period, the key on the number pad. So the number pad has different key bindings. So the period key or the full stop, that's basically your zoom in key. 1 takes you 2, 3, etc. So it's and you can flick between backwards and forwards as well by double tapping them. Pretty handy. So in here we can do some different things. We can come in there with different rotations and whatever else, and you can align them across world axis or whatever. So there are some similarities, but Blender doesn't store this data, so it keeps your scenes a lot lighter. So one of the things that Maya you might get used to quite a lot is having to go in and delete history. So there's no real history within Blender that I've found so far. So if I want to make this 2 units by 2 units, I can. I've got a 1 by 1, so I could go in and press scale. And let's say we want to do it in X. I could do scale X2, and I've got 2 meters by 1 meter by 1 meter. So that's a useful way of working. So using the combinations of the function tool. So say for instance we wanted to move the object up 0.5, we could actually go GZ 0.5 and then that would move it up 0.5. So getting used to those sort of little key combinations is pretty cool. And you've also got your transform nodes active in here as well, so you can see that that's actually happening in there. You can see the scales happening as well. So that's a start point. Now obviously because we've put this scale to 2, we wouldn't want that to stay because Blender, if it's using things like bevels and other modifiers, it relies on looking at what the scale of an object is, and obviously that's now changed. So we might want to go then to the object, and this is contextual to whatever has been selected, and we would go into the object and turn or apply the deltas. So all transforms to deltas basically puts everything back to 0. So if we hit that, you can see that we then get 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and 1, 1, 1. So this is now something that would work pretty well. So if I just undo that, so you can see, and I'll Shift D and just drop this off to the side. In fact, we'll move it in Y off 2 units. So again, this is just for that one thing that we've just done. So I've reset this with the scale back to 1, and what I would do is I would just go into wireframe mode and select my tab, select the vertexes that I want to move, and I would move those vertexes. So for these, what I would do is hold down G and X and then Control, so I can snap those out, and do the same on the other side. So G, X, and then Control. So that just snaps to grid. So now if we were to compare these, with our, let's just look at these as solid. So if I was to compare these with the modifier stack on, so this first one, let's just drop the modifier on there, and we add the bevel. You can see we've got this offset, and we add the bevel to this one. You can see that the bevel is acting as we'd expect it to act. If I just drop another segment on, but on this one it's not, even though we've actually zeroed out the transforms on this one. So scaling inside Blender is something that you need to be aware of, that there's going to be potential issues when you're using modifiers further down the stack. And for that reason, you get used to, when you're using Blender, get used to using edit mode as being your main source of changing an object's parameters. So for instance, if I was to hit GG, I can actually slide this back along its axis, or along this axis if I wanted. So this is actually sticking to the normal axis of that. But because we're using a modifier, that is retaining its bevel extremely nicely. So it's a good way of quickly fleshing out what you want to do. I'll go back to the modifier. I can change the modifier. So let's put this is a smooth shade, so we can see what it looks like. And we can pretty quickly see how it's going to work, how it's going to look. So X delete, so we delete everything in here. Shift A, we've got various primitives, so there's some really cool ones. Obviously the plane is fairly straightforward. If you want to go in and subdivide an object, you first go into edit mode, then right mouse click on it and hit subdivide. You can ramp the subdivisions up, so it's pretty easy to do certain things. But why would you want to do that if you're, say, for instance, creating a plane that's going to be one of these forever screens, for instance? We could extrude those edges in Z, so make sure they come straight up, and obviously then just select those two edges, and we could hit bevel. So I've just right mouse clicked on that, and you can see we've actually got bevel there, so we can actually use the bevel tool, and we're straight in. And if we hit tab key and shade smooth, create something very quick. And for something like this, tab key number 1, we could just slide these off to the side, so G and X, sorry, Y, slide that off to the side, same on the other side, so G, Y, and again, getting around this pretty quick, just making an object, dropping in, let's say, we come out of edit mode. It's important to come out of edit mode because if we, in this plane here, if we added another object, let's say we had a cube, that cube has become part of this plane, and which can be quite interesting. You might want to actually have that occur. Let's say, for instance, you wanted to create a wall of some sort or a block of some sort and attach this to it. You could probably do it that way, but let's not do this. Let's delete all the faces, and let's come out of edit mode. Let's just add the object as we meant to. So let's add an icosphere. They're quite cool. And let's just change the radius down to, say, 0.2, and let's just up the subdivisions 1 level. Go into edit mode and move this up, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in and add, go out of edit mode and add a light. So we can add the light from here. I'm going to add an area light. I'm going to go into rendered view, move this area light up, and you can see we're instantly starting to get some feedback on how our scene's going to look. We haven't got a camera in here yet, but let's say this is where I want to put my camera. I'll go in and Shift A, add a camera. The camera's come in here, and then I'll just go view, and I'll go align view, align active camera to view, bang. And there we go, we get the camera straight into the view. Now if the camera's not in the right position, press the N key, go into view and just lock that camera, and then just use your normal movement tools just to get this in the right space, and then take that off. And to come out of that, so we've already begun to start to create something interesting in here, and then we might want to go into a modifier. So we might want to go in and have a look at, let's say we use a wireframe. So a wireframe would give us an interesting an interesting finish to that object. So it's instantly made all of those polygon edges into wireframes themselves. Or we might want to, let's say we wanted to add a smooth subdivision surface modifier before then. So this is what the subdivision surface modifier looks like now. Let's just come out of this camera so we can just see this a little bit better. So this is what this looks like, and it creates these cool looking sort of holes in the geometry. But we could actually just move this above the stack, and then we actually end up with like smoothing out before we actually do the thickness. So you can actually jump these up and down, which in Maya would be not good. But look at the shadows that we're getting as well underneath. So that's pretty cool. And we could add Shift D. Let's just move this out to the side. Let's hit rotation twice. So it's just going to focus then on this down to the side. And then let's set this object, and let's go in and add. Let's go to the shading tab. And let's just create a little material there. So this needs a new material. So let's do it in here. So we go plus, new, and let's take this all the way down. So make it quite dark. But then let's change the metallic. So it's quite highly metallic, up to 1. And you can see we're getting that sort of that metallic in there. Let's change the roughness right down. Look at that. So there we go. That's what we're that's how we're working with this object. And then obviously if we right mouse click on this and shade smooth, we get this beautiful. Press the period key, we can just use this then as the center point. Look at that. Now if we were then to create another, let's create another surface, so mesh. Let's create a UV sphere. Let's scale this right down. So we want this to be a radius of, let's see. Let's say give it a radius of 0.15. And then let's move this up. So we'll just open up our toolbox at the side. Bring this up here like this. Let's get this eyeballed into place. Just going to eyeball it up quite literally. And then I'm going to add a material to this. New material, and let's make this material an emission shader. Everybody loves emission shaders when you're working in Blender. And let's go back here, and this emission shader, let's give it a strength of 15. Let's turn on our ambient occlusion and glow, and of course screen space reflections, we want those on. And let's just give the color a little bit of a sort of a glow in there. Then back to our camera, and let's make this dark. So let's give it a darker background. So let's make this base color sort of a deep blue. There we go, and then hit render. Boom. And so just from a couple of primitive objects, we got quite a decent little object render out, which is obviously something that was pretty good to do.